Hello everyone, I'm Clay Jenkinson, the director of the Dakota Interviews project here at Bismarck State College. We've conducted a number of preliminary interviews, and we want to present to you now a highlights reel of portions of the first few interviews. You'll meet a number of remarkable North Dakotans, so this highlights reel gives you a sense of the sorts of people we're interviewing and the kinds of wonderful things that they say when they have a chance to relax behind the cameras here at Bismarck State. So let's watch now highlights from the first few interviews of the Dakota Interviews project. And then you drive into North Dakota sometime in the 1970s, and it's actually a very conservative state that doesn't take a lot of political chances, guards its money very carefully.
The way I used to explain it to my friends is that you could argue that North Dakota is a very conservative state. You could also argue that it's very liberal. I mean, when you say it's very liberal, you know, you do have the socialist institutions. You do have the ability to put laws and constitutional amendments directly on the ballot. And as far as conservatism goes, the first Friday I had off when I was working was Good Friday. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go down and have a drink. And I went down, and the bars are all closed because Good Friday was a state holiday, and also by law, the places that sold alcoholic beverages were closed. So I thought, well, what a bummer this is. And you couldn't go into the grocery store on Sunday when I first came here because we had blue laws, which were subsequently, well, I mean, they still exist, but there's certainly a shadow of what they once were. Yeah, I mean, you could tell that it was easy to tell that there was a social conservative strain that was very strong.
So let's go through this quickly. Give me a little Margaret City political profile, big government, little government, that sort of thing. How do you see the world?
I believe in the principle of subsidiarity, that government governs best, that governs least, and that governs best at the local level.
Very Thomas Jefferson, yes.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. What else?
Okay, I guess I would believe in less regulation. You know, I was always trying, when I was a legislator, I always tried to figure out how can we cut the regulations on people, because as a small business owner, when my dad died in '81, I wound up being a partner in Buy Rate Grocery. And so, you know, the Americans with Disabilities Act was coming through, and we had to change our doorways and all these different things. I know what impact those government regulations have on small businesses, and it's devastating. It is so costly. And so, you know, I've always been opposing government regulation, or, you know, less government regulation, lower taxes. I believe that you can spend your money better than the government can spend it. I had a man when I was out walking, and I thought, boy, he sure understands me. He said, why can't you cut my taxes so I can have the money to remodel my kitchen? He said, then I might stay in Bismarck and retire here. Because he said, right now with the way property taxes are going, he said, I'm going to move out of this place. I was always going to stay in Bismarck my whole life, but I'm not anymore. And so it's absolutely that basic. Cut taxes, let people spend more of their own money. They will stimulate the economy, and let things take care of themselves. The free enterprise system works.
It seems to me, and I don't know you very well, but you seem to me to be, your core values are essentially Republican and could never be Democrat.
Well, I think that's true. What you just described, I think your core values, but I think they're framed biologically, but also by your environment. Now, you know, if I had grown up in Gunther Harms's household, I think I would have been influenced by his thinking, and that would have been it would have been ingrained in me over the years. But instead, I grew up in my single mother's household in the 1960s. I mean, I was the only kid. I mean, she was divorced when I was in second grade. I was the only kid I knew in grade school whose parents were divorced.
Divorce was very rare then.
It was, and so she's a single woman running a restaurant, a truck stop restaurant by herself, raising 3 kids. So she welfare and public support was not something that she had ever even thought about. You know, she had her own business, she worked hard, she took care of her own, and so I grew up with that kind of model or role model that, and I think that influenced a lot of, you know, my thinking today.
Self-reliance.
Absolutely, you know, you just, you know, and her mother was much the same. Her mother was also a widow with 7 children, owned a farm in McKenzie County, took care of those 7 kids, ran that farm by herself, and she too was a big influence. Her name was Bessie Freisinger, and I think the environment that we grow up in, you know, has a huge effect on us. And had I grown up in Gunther Harm's household, I'd be different than I am today.
You know, leaders come, in my view, in all different sizes and shapes and styles. You know, and so I don't think there is one formula that.
But if somebody were writing the Dennis Johnson leadership book for airport kiosks, what would be the qualities that you would point to that make you a leader? Maybe not the world's greatest leader, or not the only type of leader, but an effective leader.
Okay, I'm the kind of guy that if you got a crowd in the room, I can walk in, very few people notice I came, and when I leave, very few people notice I'm gone. I'm the kind of guy that if there's a series of 6 hills out there and we need to charge up the right one and take it, I might not be the guy leading the charge, but I know which of the 6 hills we should charge up.
So you were 8 weeks wandering about with a girlfriend through Europe and seeing the usual countries, and that must have been a marvelous experience between periods of your life.
Oh, it was just terrific. It was just so fantastic. And then I got back to Bismarck and met David City, the love of my life. And so we've been married 38 years.
And where did you meet him?
On a blind date. I knew who he was.
Yes.
He had been teaching at BSC when I was a student here, but of course he never would have dated a student, and I never would have thought. You know, I just assumed my professors were all older. Well, he is a little older than I am, but not that much. And so then a good friend said, well, my husband is on a softball team with David City. We think you guys would really hit it off. And we sure did. Within 3 months we were engaged, and 3 months later we were married.
Oh my
and
goodness.
Here we
That
are,
was, what,
4
38
kids.
years ago?
38 years ago, almost 39.
I've followed the legislature for many years, and these people almost, I have great respect for them. They were elected, they're taking time out of their lives to do the work of the public, and I think that demands respect. I have a lot of friends who think of legislators as people who have it easy, that they have a lot of perks, that they are essentially a self-serving bunch, and in my experience, that couldn't be further from the truth. They really are, I think, animated by a sense of public service and what is good public policy. They have great disagreements about what constitutes good public policy, and that's where we, rock and roll. But I think that they are genuinely sincere about their ability, or their goal is to have the sort of public policy that they think is good for the people of North Dakota, and there's just a lot of disagreement about what that is. And
I don't know, our politics is, I guess we're a heavy red state, so you can kind of expect what comes with that. At times they do things that seems a little like, what are those guys doing over there? But the passion, like you said, some abortion laws and things like that. I feel we should be working on more pressing concerns than focusing on such a hot topic and try to push that through. Focus on the oil and what it's doing to the state, from the environment to the people to the economy. Just work on that. Don't be branching out so many other areas. Just try to deal with the main problems we have at hand. And that's what I'd like to see, but it's not going to happen.
Everything doesn't have to be easy, in my opinion. Everything in the world doesn't have to be easy. It's okay to do things another way sometimes. in order to preserve something, or for many other reasons. Perhaps I'm not explaining that very well, but I just don't think that we have to do everything the easiest way. Every road doesn't have to be paved. Every highway doesn't have to be a 4-lane. We don't always have to have great access to everything. Sometimes it's okay to live a little more simply. North Dakotans are used to living with inconveniences. I mean, just by nature of living in North Dakota, we have to deal with so many things that I take for granted and you take for granted. And then I realize when I talk to friends in other parts of the country that they don't have to worry about these things. Icy roads, being plowed into your house, not being able to get out of your driveway, 30 degrees below zero, just things like that, ice. And so we're used to that in North Dakota. People here are tough. And so they certainly know about inconvenience and how to deal with it. And so I think we need to continue to be tough.
Well, we're not. I mean, nothing stays the same, Clay. We can't keep that same level of emotion that I have for going forever. I mean, times change, and so we have to move forward. But what we do need to keep are our core values, which means, okay, our core values are our faith in God, our safety and security, our belief in the legacy of this land and in preserving this land and in keeping it unstained for future generations. And remembering that it's the ag economy that is the bread and butter of this state, always has been. It's what brought people here, and it will remain so. And so that's why we need to support infrastructure that will help everyone. And so, and along with that, it's, quality of life in all sorts of different ways, good education, all sorts of different things, good universities. I mean, I think we want to sustain the best of North Dakota in whatever way we can. And that's the goodness of the people who serve in the legislature. By and large, they're just people who rise up for a time. They're good-hearted folks who relate well to others and who want to keep those same values around for the next generation.
How well is North Dakota doing here?
Oh, North Dakota is the best place in the world
Why?
to live.
Why?
I mean, look at our economy. Look at everything going for us. So, and thank heavens that the Lord looked down on this little piece of prairie and decided to bless us with oil.
I think of this Bakken as a black swan event.
What do you mean?
Well, I think a black swan occurs once every, 10,000 swans or whatever it is. It's an event that occurs seldomly. If you're a mathematician, you think of the normal curve and you get out there on the tail end of the normal curve. A black swan is a tail end event. It just rarely happens. So if you're a planner, you're not planning for those kinds of things. You're planning for the things that are likely to occur. So this is a black swan event. And so, initially we didn't see it as this thing that was going to literally exceed 1 million barrels a day in production. Some of the early projections had maybe reaching 1 million barrels per day off in 2020 or 2022, and of course we're at 1 million barrels per day now. So it started slow.
But there were people who remembered the last boom,
Right.
and they were pretty wary of booms.
Well, you want to be careful about saying this time it's different, but this time it's different.
Why?
Why? We've never had a boom like this. That's why I called it a black swan event. I mean, if it was like the 50s and the 70s, then I think we would approach this a lot differently. But there's enough evidence to indicate that this is so different from what we experienced in the 50s and the 70s. I mean, one of the statistics that just jumps out at me is in the history of global oil production, there's only, I think the number is either 9 or 10, I'll use 10. There's only been 10 oil fields that have reached the 1 million barrels per day level.
In the history of oil production?
In the history of oil, globally. And the Bakken is number 10. I mean, that's pretty significant, and it's right here in our backyard.
Of all of the stories in the docket of North Dakota history that have occurred since 1889, how big is this story going to be?
Well, it's the biggest. It has resulted in the revival of the state of North Dakota. I mean, the state of North Dakota, until just recently, had its peak population in 1930. And that's quite sad when you think about it. One of the things that a former House Majority Leader said that I thought was fairly instructive, he said that we have a government in North Dakota built for 3 million people. We're just waiting for the other 2.5 million to show up. And the prospect of that actually happening was nil until we came into this energy boom period that we have been having. I don't know if we'll continue to have it. I do think that we are looking at a situation where North Dakota is going to be a key to the nation's energy production for 20 years, 30 years or more.
Some of my business, what I'll do is I'll introduce people and educate them about what the Bakken is like, and I use the example. Typically we'll be at a restaurant having dinner, and there will be refreshments there, and I'll describe for them that a traditional oil well is a traditional oil play is simply we're trying to take a straw and put it into that coffee cup and that glass of Coke and this bottle of beer. And we're probably at best we might get we might win 40% out of the time, maybe 50 if we're lucky. But I said now the difference is all of those vessels are sitting on this table, and the table is the Bakken. And now we know that table is there, and we know it covers a certain expanse within western North Dakota and eastern Montana. And we kind of know where the edges are that will be profitable. And I said, so now all we do is we just go down to that table and we turn our drill bit and we drill 2 miles and continue to keep it inside the table. And so that's really conceptually the difference between what we're doing now.
One of the issues that people now face, especially young people, is why would I go to college when there's so much economic opportunity, especially young men? You go out into the area around Williston and Watford City, and there are really high-paying jobs, maybe higher paying than you would get after a 4-year degree at an institution. And as you're saying, anyone who wants to work in the service industries in Bismarck can almost automatically get work at a pretty good wage. So what makes you want to stay in school given that?
For me, it's, well, how long is the oil going to last? I'd say for anybody in general, going to college after high school, is the smartest thing that you can do. Not only do you get an education, so you don't have to be that oil worker, just down at the bottom of the totem pole, but if you get your education and get a degree, you can become like a supervisor right away or what have you. So,
Dickinson sits on the bottom side of the Bakken. We're not in the sweet spot. Stark County is not one of the 4 major oil producing counties in the state, but yet we're the county that has the second most oil jobs. And I think a lot of that's because people want to live in Dickinson, especially if they have families. And so again, it has to do with that curb appeal. It has to do with organized development, that you have good planning and zoning ordinances, and then you implement them, you enforce them. So.
How much pushback do you get from companies because these special corridors that you've designed make building more expensive? They could do it cheaper if you didn't insist upon certain conditions.
Right. early on we got pushback. I would have developers who would sit in my office and tell me our process is too expensive, too slow, we need to do this fast, and I would listen to them for a while and then say, excuse me, but here in Dickinson we're not interested in doing it fast. We're interested in doing it well. If you want to do it fast, go someplace else.
If you had to give us a preliminary grade, how we've handled it since 2005 to 2014, how would you assess it so far?
I'd give us a C.
A C, average. That's pretty critical for someone in your position.
Yeah, no, I think we could have done better in a lot of arenas. I do.
Well, name a few. Just, I mean, water supply was one.
I think the pace of the development itself. I mean, that's something that results from the drilling permits that the state of North Dakota issues, and you know, we've had some policy changes now with regard to flaring, and I think the state's going to see a closer connection to oil well development and infrastructure more closely aligned to that development. I think you'll see that. But I do think that we've made the mistake of creating that kind of gold rush mentality that I don't think serves us well. And I do get concerned about irrational exuberance. You know, the oil industry itself, the resource, the ability to develop it, get it to the market, that I have absolute confidence in. But some of the other evolutions that are around that industry, I'm a little concerned about.
There's a new phrase that I've been hearing in the last few weeks, and I've been using myself. It's Bakken fatigue. Those of us who live in the Bakken, those of us who work in the Bakken, I think are, to one degree or another, are experiencing Bakken fatigue. Now, I grew up in a small community. It isn't that they don't want more orderly development. They don't have the staff. And see, that's where if you have a plan, if that's one of the issues, if you've got small communities saying, we don't have planners, we don't have engineers, well, maybe that's where the state can step in and say, we'll provide the planners, we'll provide the engineering services. We can provide you with the model ordinances that you need to control and manage your development.
So, talk about leaving and coming back. North Dakota was this sort of quiet farm state, and you're gone for a couple of years. And what was your impression when you returned?
It was different. There was a lot of growth, and I would hear about it when I was gone, but I didn't really grasp the extremity of it.
And how do you like the change?
I like it. I think it put North Dakota on the map.
How so?
Because it'd be impossible not to hear about us now. And, it kind of gave us strength. I think people kind of found their respect for North Dakota.
Why is the Elkhorn Ranch so important? We know why it's beautiful, but why is it so important to the historical memory of Theodore Roosevelt?
Theodore Roosevelt was our greatest conservation president, and he developed many of his ideas about conservation while he was in North Dakota, while he was at the Elkhorn Ranch. He realized the land was being overused, overgrazed at that time, and so he recognized all this. The wilderness was disappearing. It was the 1880s, and the wilderness was disappearing already. The wildlife species that he loved were disappearing. Some of the birds that he loved were more rare. So he realized that very early on as a conservationist, and when he became president, he set aside 230 million acres of public lands that we still enjoy today. And so the Elkhorn Ranch is very important to developing Theodore Roosevelt's conservation ethic, his time spent there. And so we need to honor that by preserving it as it is.
I want to stay around North Dakota for sure.
Why?
I really like it around Buell. Like I want to, if I
You
could
wanna go back?
if I could go back to Buell and work there, yes, I would. But I like Bismarck too. Like just I've traveled to like Las Vegas and a lot of different places, Minnesota's, and it just doesn't feel the same. Like I just like how things are around North Dakota.
But in turn, you mentioned that, you know, we've seen a sea change in the North Dakota culture, and that's certainly true. I mean, I think that this is kind of exemplified by Art Link, with whom you're quite familiar, the former governor, the former congressman. And Art Link was like the paragon of old school North Dakota, you know, someone who's temperate, didn't gamble, very conservative in his personal habits, in his financial habits. And one of the things that he was against was gambling, and particularly a state lottery. And I think it was I don't remember what year it was, but eventually North Dakota did vote overwhelmingly in favor of participating in a multi-state lottery. And I was privy to a conversation between him, Governor Link, and another gentleman named Bill Simons, who is from Rolla, North Dakota, whose father was the editor of the Nonpartisan Leader, and he had very deep roots in old school North Dakota, if we could call it that. And Bill Simons said to Art Link, you know, we don't know this place anymore. The North Dakota, our North Dakota is gone.
In your tenure as the superintendent of Theodore Roosevelt National Park, you had a series of significant issues. Can you sort of walk us through the big ones and put them in a time frame?
I would say there were three very significant career-changing types of issues. The first few years from when I arrived at the park in 2003 till 2007, it had to do with the Eberts Ranch, a private ranch that we wanted to acquire for the national park.
In the view shed of Theodore Roosevelt National Park.
Near the Elkhorn Ranch, yes.
Right.
And so that took up the first 3.5 years or so of the majority of my attention. After that, it was focusing on elk in the national park, elk production, and then the last few years have been primarily dealing with the energy boom going on all around us.
I'm a North Dakota citizen first and foremost. The Republican Party is a vehicle, is an end, is a means to an end, I'm an advocate and a fan of the oil industry, but it's just an industry. It's just a business, so in the end, I was more. I guess my point in saying that is, I care about my state and the state that I've grown up in and that I'm intending to live in until probably the day I die, and so I'm interested in the state's well-being long term.